Hello, folks. Nice seeing all of you here. So initially, when I was working on this talk, it was more of live coding. The live coding aspect is still there, but I got some feedback from a friend saying that you type like a grandma. So I reduced that part, but hopefully it's still fun. So the title is Let Figma Code, and we'll go through what Figma is, what kind of code it can produce and stuff. But yeah, let's start with the talk. I'll start with a brief introduction about myself. There's a slight correction now. I'm an ex-senior front-end engineer at Razorpay. This week was sort of my last week here. And so outside of Razorpay, I'm a part of the Webpack bundler team. If you know or don't know about Webpack is a module bundler. So whenever you're working on, like if any of you have used Create React app, internally it uses Webpack bundler. If you use Next.js, internally it uses Webpack to bundle its code and sort of work. Especially the new feature React Server Components is completely sort of built on Webpack. So other than Webpack, I do some open source stuff with my own projects. I have a couple of my own open source projects. If you go to my GitHub profile, you'll see them. And recently I started playing this game called Factorio. If any of you do play it, sort of reach out to me and play it multiplayer. So yeah, that was a brief introduction about myself. And here's what you can expect from this talk. It'll be a lot of words. On a more serious note, we'll basically start with some understanding of what a design system is, because it's sort of required when we are talking about Figma plugins, and how like designs get converted into code. We'll go through what Figma is, what its plugin ecosystem is, and we'll do live coding on like building a basic Figma code generation plugin. And after that, I'll sort of give you a brief demo about something like a code gen plugin that I built at Razorpay called Razor Sharp. And I'll also show you the impact that it's created at Razorpay, and how it's influenced like engineers' lives. So let's start. First slide is what the F is a design system. I've been told that that bad word is not allowed, so I had to add asterisk. So I'm not saying it out loud, as I've been told that it's going on YouTube. So if you read the definition, a design system is a centralized collection of guidelines, principles, usable components, resources that are used to create consistent, cohesive, efficient design and user experiences across products or platforms within an organization. Yeah, really nice definition. I didn't understand it either. So I've sort of, and obviously this definition is taken from Brad Frost's sort of blog and book. If any of you are into design systems, you should read, like there's a book called Atomic Design by the author bradfrost.com. You should give it a read. So I sort of have my own definition of what a design system is. And like my definition is that it's a common language that designers and developers communicate with. And what I mean by that is, so has it, if you've ever worked with a designer, that they'll tell you, right, ki, I want a spacing between these two items to be 40 pixels. But as a developer, like hard coding things into pixels is generally not a good idea, because building responsive UIs for multiple different screens, and we usually work with either REM units or emphasis units. So then you have to do this jungle gym of how much actually is 40 pixels into REMs or EMs, and you have to do that calculator key, like one REM unit is 4 pixels if your base font size is 16.6 pixels, and you have to do it for every REM unit. So wouldn't it be better that like a designer comes to you and tells you that I want a spacing, but like the 8th spacing variant. So like it'll be something like spacing dot 8, and that will be a constant that's defined somewhere, which is also a responsive constant, which internally a system handles it. So I think of design systems as a common language that both designers and developers use. And a really good example of this is a lot of products that Google builds. So I have two screenshots here. One is from Google Drive and the other is from Gmail. And if you take a look, they look so similar. Like the font sizes are like very similar. The way the page is laid out, the colors, and in general, they look very consistent because Google follows a design system or a design philosophy called material design, and this is the third version of it. And if you use Android, like Lollipop 5.0 was actually the first version of material design, and it's evolved. So Google products look, very consistent in terms of UI and UX, which is attributed to having a design system, which is like a set of guidelines and stuff which says like this is how you build your UI. And so yeah, and really, like I'll go into some detail on what a design system is, but I'm not obviously going to cover everything since this is not a talk about design systems, but this is some base stuff. And the base, like the base thing of a design system that which on top you build stuff is a design token, and a token is basically like any value. It can be a spacing value, it can be a typography value, or it can also be a color value. And so here I've taken these two examples from like Blade, which is razor-based design system. And so if you see here, these are like spacing tokens, which is like theme. So if you see this 2 pixels is theme.spacing.1. And so you don't write 2 pixels in your code base anymore. You just say that like I want the spacing to be spacing.1, and which both developers and designers understand. And similarly, there are theme tokens. So you don't say that I want the background to be black color. You say that I want the background to be colors surface background level 1, and I won't go into semantics on how this is done, but yeah, this is basically like the base thing on which a design system is built. And again, you can read more about it if you read Atomic Design by Brad Frost. And this again is taken from Brad Frost's book, and so this is more of an understanding of how like a design system is divided into. After tokens, one level higher is atoms, which are like very base components like a button, a text, or an image. And based with atoms, you build molecules like a header component, a footer component, the status bar and stuff, with which you can build an organism, which is like a post component. And this after that, this sort of becomes a gray area. So yeah, this is a very brief introduction of what a design system is. Right. So let's move on to the next thing. What is a Figma? So how many of you have like used or heard of what Figma is? Good. So I don't have to talk about Figma. So yeah, as you know, it's a design tool that designers use, and then a designer will throw over that design file over the wall and say, hey, this is the design, you go and build it, and don't come back to me until it's done. And they'll say that after you've completed building, and they'll be like, this color does not exactly match with what the design I gave you. And to sort of solve this problem, what Figma did was, Figma was like, okay, like this is a tool for designers, we don't expect developers to be happy with it. But they said, like, we want to improve the handoff process. It shouldn't be like a designer just throws over the design file over the wall to a developer and that's it. So they wanted to build a better handoff process. And so they introduced something called dev mode. This is very recent. So like there is a switch, if you go to Figma, there is a switch at the top right somewhere in which you can switch into a dev mode. And this mode is really nice because you don't so if you click on any element, it gives you some idea, like it will tell you what the padding is. And if you select CSS, it will generate some basic CSS code. But that is obviously hard-coded like CSS. So it gives you a brief idea, but obviously you're not going to write that code down into your code base. Obviously you have to use a design system. So it does not generate code for your design system, and like whatever code it will generate, it won't be consistent with the other UI that you're building. And so I felt like there is more improvement that can be done to the process. Like if you already have built the UI in Figma using your design system's Figma components, and you already have components in your code base as well, and you have the common components in both places, how you can work on improving this handoff process. And so that is an idea that I started with as an experimentation. And okay, so before we go into that, I sort of want to explain. You've heard this term, right? Pixel perfect UI. Whenever you read a job post, it'll say that we expect you to build a pixel perfect UI. And when they say pixel perfect, they usually mean like this everything should match with what a designer has given to you in the Figma file. And this is a really painful process because the way it will usually work is you refer the Figma file, and so you will like you refer the Figma file, you see that this is a button that's used, and you have that you know that this button exists in your design system, and then you have the documentation of your components. So what will usually happen is if it's in Storybook, you're lucky. If there's no documentation, it sucks for you. But if you have Storybook, you'll go to Storybook and you'll see the docs for the button component, and you'll figure out, okay, I want to make this button look like what it is in Figma. So you have to figure out, okay, which variant of the button is it? Is it a secondary button? Is it the primary button? Or is it a tertiary button? After that, does it have an icon to the left, an icon to the right? What is the size of the button? If there's any custom padding applied to it, and then you have to figure it out from the docs. Then go back to Figma and see, does it does the code I wrote, does the UI actually match Figma or not? And more often it will happen like you have to switch between two things a lot to make it match like what's being given to you in Figma, and that is a huge time sink. You have to keep switching between Figma and Storybook and just keep matching it with what you're building. So this is the problem that I want to solve. I want to reduce this sort of time waste, like just save time, and that's sort of where we come to code generation, and is the live coding section of this presentation. And as I've told you, like I type like a grandma, so I hope you'll forgive very slow typing. Okay, let's get started on that. So what I've done over here is I've generated a very basic template that I'll actually show you where the template is. So it's a repos, like I worked on Razor Sharp, and then I was like, this template might be useful to other people, so I just took the base things and created a repository of your own. After this presentation, if you're building a plugin of your own, this should serve as a good starting point because it contains all of the configuration and stuff. It's available as an open source repository. If you just go to Figma CodeGen template, you'll get it. I want to start by sort of explaining the template a little, since it might help you if you want to build your own thing. Right. So while building this, there was one important package, which was like Figma plugin typings, and this is a package that's it's not required, but it's really good because if any of you are familiar with TypeScript, are going to be using TypeScript, it gives you a lot of type annotations, which makes your job easier with type support. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of detail with the Webpack config and stuff. It's a fairly simple thing. It just takes all of your TypeScript files and converts it to JavaScript and whatnot. But one interesting file over here is this manifest file. And based on this is how Figma understands what plugin have you exactly built. Before that, are all of you familiar with that there are Figma plugins, or should I sort of explain that? It seems like most people are. So you have Figma, you can sort of build custom plugin. There are also a lot of plugins available. And Figma's plugin system depends on this manifest file. It tells Figma like what your plugin does. Some things obviously are self-explanatory, like the name and a unique ID if you're going to be publishing it on Figma's thing. Figma's library, and the other is what version of the Figma API you are using. It's not that important. This is just a config. Main file is just the entry point for your plugin, not that important in this template. But these three, the last three lines are. So editor type basically says that you want your plugin to work in dev mode. You can add multiple things here, but since we are building a CodeGen plugin that is for developers, we'll keep it to dev mode. And capabilities basically says that you're building a CodeGen plugin, so that's what the capability section is. And your same plugin, can generate code for multiple different languages. So if you have that, if that is a capability you want to build, you can add it to like the Codegen languages array. Right now we are just generating React code, so it's fine. You just added React, and yeah, the way you add a plugin to Figma is you first turn on dev mode. Hopefully you can see everything. I have already added it, but if it's a new plugin, you just go to plugin section, go to development here, and say that I want to add a new plugin. Like you will do import plugin from manifest, and you'll just load in the manifest.json file that I just explained. Since I've already added it, we won't be doing that. Right, so let's start the development server. With the template that we start the development server is just yarn dev. And that starts the development server. Let's just hope that it sort of works. Since it's live coding, things don't always go well. So while that is happening, so for this presentation, I sort of built a very basic component in Figma. So some people, like some of you might not be familiar with the concept of components in Figma. So with like you can basically have components in Figma that you can later on use. So I have a button, very simple button component here. At the top you have a primary button. This is the secondary button, and there is the tertiary button. And it only really has one property, which is the variant of the button. That's sort of enough for to show how it works. And since I'm in design mode right now, I can have an instance of this. So there's a difference, right? This is the definition of the button component itself, and this is an instance. So I cannot edit this. It's like how React works, right? You can have a component and then you reuse it. So this is an instance of that component. Let's say I'll have some text here. Since I like React Mumbai and the organizers are really cool, we'll say React Mumbai is cool. And this is just a, I can sort of, I've created a button. 1 second, layers. And over here, I just get a drop down saying what button you want to use. Let's say I want to use the secondary variant because I think it looks nice with the outline and stuff. And with this, we'll use this as the base for the Codegen plugin. So let's click here. Let's select the button instance. We will go back to dev mode. Hopefully the server is running. Yes, it is. And right now it's a basic template, so it just says hello world. Are you able to see it, or should I zoom in more?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, good. So the base template just generates hello world text for everything, and we are in dev mode, so this is what dev mode looks like. I have selected the Codegen plugin over here. Let's start coding with the fun part. Now, this is what the template will give you. I'll explain what this base code is. It's very simple. I just check are we in dev mode or not. If it's not in dev mode, I don't want to run the plugin. And we are also checking if we are in Codegen mode or not. Right? And if both of these conditions are true, I'll say that every time Figma asks me to generate code, I'll return it some value. And so actually, I told you, right, ki Figma, that typing package is really cool. It's because of this. If I hover over it, it'll give me like type definition. Figma is telling that this Figma plugin API and stuff. So this actually really helps. If I make a mistake here and don't return anything, it will shout at me saying ki, what are you doing with your life? You're not returning a good value. So okay, we have things set up, and whenever you click on a node, this callback gets fired, and the node you clicked on in dev mode gets passed to you as like the node parameter over here. I want to actually look at, because there's a lot of fun stuff inside of node. So let's actually console log it out, and we'll see what's inside of it. Right. You also have, since Figma is an Electron app, you can actually open the console over here, and you will be able to see stuff. So I console log stuff, right? So it's actually a frame node. A frame is just, so Figma actually has, the way Figma works is, if you're familiar with the browser's DOM model, like there's an HTML node at the top, and it will have children based on what is getting rendered on the page. The children might be division, head, body, whatever. Similarly, Figma has a sort of a AST. It starts with the base node is called scene node, and yeah, it has a different it has a few different types. The ones we are interested in are component, there's an instance, and there's text. The one we have selected right now is frame, but that's because I've selected the wrong thing. But if I click on button over here, you'll be able to see its properties. So it will say instance node over here. Are you folks able to see it? I'll just check if this can be zoomed in or not. Right. So it has log. You can see that it's an instance node. If I open the whole thing, it will have a lot of properties on it. The ones I am interested in is, since it hasn't given, I want to generate code, so I have to know, which component is this, but it hasn't given me that information, so it's just an instance. So there's a property in this thing called main component, which actually tells you since it's an instance, what component is it actually coming from. But there's something tricky here, since the component here would point to the secondary button, but that's not actually the component, right? It's just a variant of the button component. So what we actually want to do is get access to this, the actual button component, which is like a combination of its three variants, right? So if I want to get the name of the component, what I'll do is component name, I'll take node, I'll do main component, and I'll do that I want the parent, and we'll see if this gets logged or not. It's just yeah. So see, this is what I was talking about. It's saying that main component does not exist on scene node, because I'm not actually checking if it's an instance node or not. So I have to add that check. But I only want to, as of now at least, only want to generate code if it's an instance. So, yep, node main component, that's fine. So we'll actually console log the component node as of now, or maybe let's just add a name. So this should give us the component name. If I click outside it, clear the console, and click on this thing again, it is now logging that it's a button component. So half of the problem is solved, but not half, 1/3. Like, we still need to find out two more things. First is, what variant of the button component is it? Now, the same way you have properties in React, you can pass some properties to a Figma component as well. And over here, one of those properties is variant. So you can access those properties using another property. So it's basically this thing called component properties. If I log it here, it will actually give me all the properties that have been passed to Figma. And it tells me that there's only one property, which is the variant, and its value is that it's a secondary button variant. It's a secondary variant of the button component. So I want access to this as well. Right? So what I'll do is I'll get the variant of the button. And I can do properties, I can do variant, I'll get the value. So we have two things, two problems are solved, one is still remaining. I want to get access to what exactly is inside the button. And similar to how you have children in a DOM model, if you study the tree data structure, it can have children, right? And similarly, if I open up the original node, I'll see that there is a children property here somewhere. Here it is. Okay, it's just an older thing, but we'll also log. Let's get all the children inside of this node component, and we'll just say console log this out, because I want to look at what the children are. Right. So yeah, this is the children that's inside the instance, and we can see that there is a text node. The text node is obviously a node that contains some text. But yeah, it's also the node where we have a text called that's React Mumbai School. So now what you want to do is get the value of this text, and that's available inside this characters property that you can see here, right? Since it's the first child and it's the only child, I'll do like text node, and I'll say that I want the first children in the children's array. And so yeah, since I want to get the actual text from the text node, I'll say that text is text node dot characters. I'll probably ask me to actually check if it's if the type of text node is actually text or not. So let's add that check just to make TypeScript happy. So now we have the text as well. There were 3 things that we wanted, and we have all of those 3 things. So now we can generate some code from it and tell Figma that this is the code obviously that I want to generate. I'll just copy paste this since it's a part of that template itself. And since this is very basic like code generation, we'll just do some string concatenation. We'll use JavaScript template literals. So first is we have the name of the text. We have the name of the component, which is component name. We will copy that here. And we'll obviously use some imaginary component that is in code. I've not actually built it out in code as well. So yeah, we have like the button getting generated. The other is that we want the variant of the button, and so we'll add the variant property, and we'll like print out variant here. And the last thing is that we want the inside text also to be printed. So we'll put it down here. And now if I go to Figma, hopefully it will generate the correct text. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah. So if you see here, it has generated that code. So the name of the button, like the name of the component is correct. It has printed out the prop, and it has also printed out the children. So you can copy it here and use it wherever you want to. And yeah, I mean, so this is the very basic thing that you can get started on. And similarly, like this is actually the basic idea that I started with at Razorpay. And the idea was, that like I didn't want to waste my time switching between Figma and Storybook. So I was like, okay, every time the way I'll work is in design, I'll click on every component, I'll copy the code, I'll put it into VS Code, and I'll see how it works. But then I was like, it's not enough because it's not actually telling me like what's the spacing between these buttons if there are multiple things on the UI. And on top of that, if you see this, there's no actual support for tokens. Like it's not generating space in tokens. Like it'll give me pixels, Figma will give me pixels and stuff. So I wanted everything to be according to Razorpay's design system, which is Blade. I wanted to get all component names in Blade itself. Plus, I wanted to match the tokens because it shouldn't be like I'm giving my code for review and someone is like, what the hell is this and why have you written this code like this? And so I decided to take this base idea to the extreme, and I wanted to see how far can I take it. And that actually led, okay, where are my slides? Yeah. That actually led me to building something called Razor Sharp. It's a really funny name. Initially, it was just called Blade Figma plugin, but we decided to name it later. So this plugin that I built also works on the same principle that I showed you. There are some differences that it generates. Obviously, generates names from the Blade design system. All values are generated at design system tokens. It can also generate code for nested layout. So if you have like a full screen, I'll give you a demo of this. But if there's like a full screen, there's a full form, you don't have to go to each individual component one by one and generate code for that. You just click on the form and it'll generate code for the full form. And yeah, I got even more lazier. So I also said, why just generate code? Why not also generate import statements? So that's also something that I added. So like by import statements, I mean import button from Razorpay Blade. So it can also do that. And lastly, the code is open source. So if any of you are building it, you can refer to the bad code that I've written that other people fixed later. And yeah, hopefully you're not that bored or not that sleepy, then I'll give you a good demo of what the thing that I built. So yeah, the pattern itself is called Razor Sharp. We like having fun with names at Razorpay. So I switched to Razor Sharp, and these are some UI examples. This is obviously actual, like it's an actual UI that I've just changed some text. With Chica, but yeah, let's actually start with the basic thing. This is a like somewhat of a complex component. This we call it alert at Razorpay, and hopefully, if we scroll down, you'll see that it generated code. So very basic stuff. Intent is basically the variant, since it's it's a warning thing. So it says that the intent is noticed. It's picked up all the text from inside the component and also generated title and description, and along with it, it generated the import statement. And we can have more complex UI. Like if you look at like this alert is a slightly different because it has two links at the bottom. Like it has two actions that you can take, primary and link, and it can do that. So it's generated and something, basically an object saying actions that you pass something to that. And so this is obviously again the base idea that we just worked on. And now coming to the more fun stuff. Or is it this one? Yeah, and this is actually the layout thing. So if you've used Figma before, you will see that Figma has something called auto layout, which is very similar to if you use Flex in CSS, it's very similar to that. You can have a horizontal layout, which is basically flex row. You can have vertical, which is column, and you can do align top, center, and whatever you want. But all in all, it's basically like very similar to what flex is, including you can have some padding, you can have some vertical spacing between items, and this is where I started thinking like, okay, I want to also generate code for more nested layouts. At Razorpay, we have this component called box, which is basically like, it's basically a div, but instead of passing CSS class names, you can pass CSS things as props directly. So I can pass display flex to the component, so that this is a flex. And yeah, it generates code saying that I want it to be a vertical layout. I want this particular spacing token as my padding. Spacing.7 basically means 7 before that's 28 pixels if you're using desktop. So it can do that. It can, if you want some gap between items, it can do that as well. All in all, this is okay. I mean, you can generate background colors as well. It will also warn you if you try to use the wrong color. So if you look at this token, it says that like the designer has used surface text normal high contrast. This is a token that should have been used for text, but it's been used for background for whatever reason. So it generates a warning saying that only background tokens should be used for like a background color, obviously. So it can do that. But I think the most the wow thing, or the most fun I've had like showing this to most people, is this. I can take this, I can click on this, I can copy this code and I can paste it into a VS Code, and I can guarantee you that the UI will look exactly the same. So yeah, this is actually the major USP over here, that one click you can see that it's basically generated the whole form ka code, and this is what's really changed how we write code at Razorpay. Because now developers can start spending more time on working on the actual business logic. They don't have to spend their time between going from Figma and documentation, and that's what changed the culture. So in terms of metrics, I really have only two interesting ones. We have around 100 to 110 front-end developers at Razorpay, and last I checked, 65 plus developers were using it. Mind you, not everyone uses the design system, and so yeah, some like people have gone on to report saying that this has sort of reduced the development time it takes for features for up to 50%, because now they can focus mainly on writing business logic. All the time that they previously spent, writing that UI code, which was actually a lot of time, um, has drastically reduced. Also, the designers don't usually come back to them saying here the spacing does not match what is in Figma. And yeah, in terms of metrics, that's all I really have. Floor is open for questions. You can connect with me or not, since this is a slide and I'm not a cop. So yeah, any questions? So if you have any questions, any interesting, yeah.
So, in order to make this plugin work, design must follow the design system principle, right?
They don't have to follow the design system principles, but both the designer and the developer have to use components from the design system library, which is basically both in Figma plus obviously your code, because that's how it works. So yeah, I mean that is.
And the interface that you wrote, it's like depending on the what library or design library we are using, right? You just take an example of, I guess, your Razorpay library, but others might be having some other library. So there is yet one common ground where we all are agree. Like currently, the design is based out of, let's say there are multiple design system available like Andy, Material UI, and whatnot. So everyone is using the different schemas and themes. So themes that we import in our code or set in our code, how can we share that with the Figma as well? Like, did you get what I mean or not?
Are you asking like?
So let's say we set one theme in the code, and we have theme provider and etc., which will tells that this theme will be reflected. So now that same theme, if we want to update in the Figma, what will be the
Right. So if you let's take for example Material UI or Chakra, both have their community versions and also paid versions of Figma UI kits that they sell or someone else makes. So Figma has this feature called variables. If they are using that variables feature for their design tokens, you should be able to edit that variables part to match it exactly to what the theme you are using. And since it's like if I'm not wrong, Material UI is very consistent with their naming between the components plus the Figma library.
Yes.
So that is actually a really good candidate because you should be able to get it on top of that.
Thanks.
Yeah, one question from my side. So, okay. So you have shown the component. Okay. Within the component, suppose the button color is purple, but what if I'm using Tailwind and I wanted to use say color purple 500 something? So how do I define it over here? Like in your code, I can see spacing dot some number was there. So how did you define that?
As you were asking how I'm able to convert colors from Figma to
just go back to the code name. Just go back to the Figma. Yeah, over there you can see gap spacing dot 3. So how did you where have you defined that? That 3 spacing should be X number of pixels.
Oh, this thing.
Yeah.
So this comes from your design system. So design system basically says that they like in most design systems I've seen, they usually work on a scale of 4. So
Okay.
4 pixels is spacing dot 1, and I take the pixel value from Figma. I basically have a map saying, I can actually show you that because I have it inside
that's
of
what I wanted to see.
Razorpay's code. So this is Razorpay's code, like Figma plugin ka. And I should have this spacing token ka map. So I basically have this map saying that 2 pixels is spacing dot 1, 4 pixels is spacing dot 2. But I like one thing that I've done different over here is I've also added some margin of error, because if let's say if it's 56 or 57, I still want to consider at spacing dot 11. So I mean, this comes from your design system itself. If you go into Blade design systems code, you will find the same map, and it's the same code base, but yeah, just say like you can just reuse the map from your design system code base into the Figma plugin directly.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
I think you had a question. Someone from. Cool. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you, folks, for being a really good audience. It was really nice speaking to you. Thank you to the organizers as well.